Man, I love that panel. I think Jennifer and Ukanwa are both doing an amazing job challenging how we chase customer delight. I love what Latasha said there. And I was also super inspired to hear how Ukanwa responded to the tragic and horrific murder of George Floyd. I think her leadership courage is another reason why I really love being at Amazon, because we do not shy away from the hard conversations. And I think I experienced that and so many of my team did. And we're always learning how to improve ourselves. So I was really glad to hear such like a candid conversation, and that you guys get to hear it, because until you join us, and hopefully you guys are tuned in and that's why you're here, you'll be able to experience that as well. And that segues really, really well into our next panel, which we're going to be talking about affinity groups. Across all industries, there's a movement for inclusion that would ensure that all races, nationalities, and cultures are given room to showcase their talents. That's definitely the case here at Amazon, where the company's 12 affinity groups that make an impact by connecting and supporting communities and having a voice in our products and services. And more than that, a lot of these groups are very, very tight-knit and are really like family. To speak more about that impact, please join me welcome to the stage leaders from the Black Employee Network, Glamazon, Indigenous at, Latinos at, Alex Morrison, Angel Enriquez, Angelina Howard, Michael Running Wolf, and Gladys Jimenez.
Hello, welcome to our session, Affinity Groups, Intersections and Impact. My name is Angel Enriquez, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Senior Manager in Global Diversity and Inclusion Organization at Amazon. In addition to putting on events like this, I get the opportunity to work with our 12 Amazon Affinity Groups. Amazon Affinity Groups, sometimes called Employee Resource Groups, are company and executive sponsored, and they focus on building internal networks for creating community, representing their communities as customers, leading in service projects, and reaching out and connecting Amazonians to their communities as well. At Amazon, one of the things that we find is that when we go out in external events, the most positive feedback happens when employees, or rather future employees, get to hear from Amazonians themselves. And with that, I am very excited to welcome leaders from 4 of our Amazon Affinity Groups: Indigenous at, Latinos at, Glamazon, and Ben, or the Black Employee Network. So I'd like to take a minute and ask you all to introduce yourselves and include a very Amazonian introduction, which is to identify your favorite leadership principle.
Thank you, Angel. Hi, my name is Angelina Howard. I am a Senior Product Manager at Amazon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I've been at Amazon for 6 years. On my team, I'm on the digital software and video games team. I own the customer journey. When you're searching for a video game, that is my job, to make sure that you're finding the games that you're looking for. I am also the president of our Black Employee Network. I've been the president now for a little over 1.5 years. Ben's mission is to make sure that we're building a community for our employees and for our customers inside of the company and outside of it. I am super happy to be able to do this here with you all. My favorite leadership principle is earns trust. I view this leadership principle in 2 ways. One, as a leader, and also as someone who interacts with Amazon senior leaders. As a leader, it is important for me to listen to my board of directors and also to our members. I have to make sure that I am willing to accept critical feedback and making sure that people who I work with, or people who I am leading, know that they have a safe environment to give me feedback, but also to trust that I'm working on their behalf, even if they do not see updates or see what I'm doing things in the background, and I have to make sure that they trust that I'm doing that. As an employee, it's also important for me to be able to trust that my leadership is able or willing to be vocally self-critical. A lot of our senior leaders have been here since the beginning of Amazon being created, so they have really built that culture, but they have to make sure that they're also being acceptable and accepting that sometimes we want to maybe change the culture. They need to hear from our members and saying, hey, we used to do things this way, but how can we make it more inclusive? And they have to be willing to accept that the culture that we had has to change and shift. So earning trust is super critical in how we drive a company forward. And that's why it's my favorite leadership principle.
Great, thank you. Alex?
Yeah, my name is Alex Morrison. I identify as non-binary, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I've been at Amazon for a little over 1 year. I'm a senior customer solutions manager on an account team focusing on mobile apps and self-driving systems. I'm located in San Francisco, and my affinity group is Glamazon. Glamazon is a vital resource for the LGBTQIA+ community within Amazon, as well as within the broader LGBTQIA+ communities where our chapters exist. As Amazon grows, Glamazon is growing into a global organization that connects LGBTQIA+ employees to company resources and to each other, and showcases Amazon's acceptance in our communities across the globe. Let's see, my favorite Amazon leadership. My favorite Amazon leadership principle is have backbone, disagree, and commit. I come from a startup background, and for those of you who know startups, anything goes in a healthy debate when talking technology. It can get challenging, but we always ended in agreement. When I came to Amazon, this particular principle was all too familiar to me. I really respect the process here because we have the space to challenge decisions when we disagree. You may feel uncomfortable or something, but it is encouraged here for you to feel free to fight for your idea. And once a decision is made, either your decision or someone else's, you must wholeheartedly commit. And that's why I love this principle, because it allows you to have your voice in the room no matter what.
Great, thanks, Alex. Gladys, would you like to share?
Sure. Hello, my name is Gladys Jimenez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I have been at Amazon now for 9 years, and I am a tax manager, and I have held customer-facing roles, particularly in the space of global tax regulation services. One of my current functions right now is I'm part of a team that is basically responsible to ensure that we launch products and services that are tax compliance and audit ready. In addition to that, I also have the honor to serve in the Latinos at Amazon as a vice president for the global board. One of my favorite leadership principles is customer obsession, because I feel like this gives me carte blanche to exercise many of the other leadership principles. For example, if there's a problem with a product or service that affects or negatively impacts the customer experience, we are responsible for taking deep dives in researching the issues and also gather data to invent and simplify on behalf of our customers. Customer obsession is real here at Amazon, and everyone and everything revolves around having an excellent customer experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Gladys. And last but not least, Michael.
Hello, I'm Michael Runnerwolf. I've been at Amazon for 3.5 years. You can call me by he or him. And I've been a software development engineer. I'm currently in the business data technology organization. I was formerly in Alexa. More importantly, though, I am the president, the current president, and a co-founder of Indigenous Amazon's Indigenous Affinity Group, a global affinity group. And my favorite LP is Bias for Action. And I think Grace Hopper said it best: ask forgiveness rather than get permission. And I feel Amazon really embraces this. It drives a lot of our innovation, and it allows for employees all the way up to leadership to propose new products and new innovation. There was a process for that. It also allowed us to create Indigenous Ad. Indigenous Ad didn't exist before I joined Amazon. So a few of us got together and says, why don't we exist? Why aren't we recruiting Native Americans yet? And so we just did it. And then we just sort of stumbled into creating an Indigenous affinity group with the help of allies like Angel.
You know, thank you for sharing that. And I think what I really love about your introductions is you shared like the full part of who you are and what matters to you. It's not the usual, I've only been here this long and this is what I've done in the past, but really kind of who you are as a person. And that's so central to making this an environment where we want to be. You know, we talk often about Amazon's day one mentality, kind of back to that startup conversation. Alex, you shared it. Michael, you've talked about it. And really the same applies in our affinity groups. Like every other organization, we run things in a very decentralized way. We like to prompt innovation. We like people to be able to work in their local communities and work in things that are important to their customers. And we also are at different stages of maturity for affinity groups, if you will. If we think about, Michael, if you talk about where you are from a startup, you've talked about this, the 2 new affinity groups this year, Families At and Body Positive Peers are also in that startup mode. But for you, as you're in startup mode, how do you think about that and how it applies to scaling the opportunities for your community across Amazon, or to using Amazon to scale those opportunities for your community?
Yeah, so the most important impact for Indigenous at, I think, our most important core values to us is, number one, create an internal community within Amazon and also broaden the greater community. There's not very many Indigenous technologists, unfortunately, and we're not very visible within the industry in Amazon, and particularly within Amazon before I joined, but that's been our goal. Like, if we move Amazon just a millimeter or a centimeter, we have huge impact. And with the Indigenous, in the Indigenous technology space, we've been partnering with outside groups like the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And when we started working with them and partnering with them, we attracted attention, and it also moved the industry. Other groups, our competitors and like-minded technology companies started sponsoring ACES alongside with us. And so we even just show an intent of helping to build the greater Indigenous community, that Amazon just has impact. And of course, directly funding efforts to increase how many computer scientists there are in the corporate space. And of course, recruiting them.
That's good too. That's great, Michael. And that's actually, like, you think about that first phase of the startup, and it's naming your customer. And for you, it's really identifying and naming the Indigenous community globally as current and future customers and employees of Amazon. I love that analogy. Gladys, you talk often that even though Latinos At is not a new affinity group, that you're really looking to kind of revitalize and recharge it. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what your approach is as you think about that startup model?
Sure. Latinos at Amazon started out many years ago, actually in 2012, and it basically started out like more of a social venue for people to come together and become part of our community, right? So just think about starting in a big company where you may not see a lot of people that look like you. So I thought it was very important for us to have like an internal community for people to talk, practice Spanish, share common things of our culture. But however, progressively over the past 2 years, we have taken a hard look at everything that is going around us, the gaps in representation, opportunities for career development, where we are within the company. And so we've pivoted and really have focused on creating understanding what the customer needs are to advocate for the customer, understand what the recruiting opportunities are to increase representation here within the company, and also take a look into the career developments that are needed for Latinos here at Amazon to have long, successful careers here at Amazon. And lastly, another goal is community engagement and outreach. We have an amazing company who is backing a lot of our efforts, and we are utilizing those resources to ensure that we reach out to our community, especially those non-for-profit organizations that are serving the Latino community that is heavily impacted by COVID-19.
Great, that's great, Gladys. But I love that you didn't lose the celebration either. Right? We just celebrated a wonderful Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's so important. And in the past, I've worked with affinity groups where sometimes they felt like there needed to be a trade-off where you couldn't celebrate, that you had to only be business focused. And I often coach them, really think about how important celebration is to your communities as well. And it is to elevate and to lift people and the cultures and traditions that we bring to the table. So I think that and Indigenous Peoples Day will have just celebrated, and a broad variety of other celebrations that came in. It's an important part to keep in mind. So I love that you're keeping that while also saying, it also has to be about defining what really needs to happen in a way that advances us throughout. So Alex and Angelina, you, Glamazon and Ben are long and standing affinity groups. And so when you think about some of the challenges that we talk about at Amazon, is how do you stay day one? How do you keep from being day two? Tell me about how you're thinking about that and what the next evolution is for your affinity groups. And Angelina, if I could ask you to start on that.
Yeah, so Ben has turned 15 years old this year, which to me is just so mind-blowing because it is always day one, and I feel like we're constantly reinventing ourselves. So for us, we're constantly thinking about how do we refine or define who our customer is, because when you think about the Black experience, it's not monolithic, it's a spectrum. So it's important for us to make sure that we're acknowledging and celebrating that. So although Amazon is based in the US, we have to make sure that we're not just putting on programming that is focused just on the US, Black Americans. That's not the only people who are here. Those are not the only employees that we have. So making sure that we're acknowledging that and celebrating that. And one of the things that we've started to make sure that we focus on is really thinking about the African diaspora and the intersectionality within that culture. So when we think about Amazon has been around and Ben has been around for 15 years, how do we make sure that we're continuing to figure out what are the problems that our community is facing? So we, for example, now we're moving towards a global board structure. We've been operating outside of Seattle by having different chapters. We have over 25 chapters. But how can we have a group of people really focused on driving initiatives across the company? Beyond headquarters, beyond just the US, we have chapters in Brazil, Costa Rica, Luxembourg, Cape Town. How do we make sure we're making initiatives that reflect all of our employees? And also thinking about how do we move from discussion to having action. So we created a community, and that was and still is the foundation of Ben, but how do we make sure that we're driving action that explicitly creates a culture where our communities can actually thrive? So we're not afraid to think big. I think Angel can tell you sometimes she's kind of like, what in the world is Ben doing now? Oh my gosh, like what is happening? But we're not afraid to, and that's the big thing. Like you have to think big. You can't just, stick with the status quo. So we think of things that are just, out of nowhere. And then everyone's like, oh, it's a good idea. I don't think we've had really any pushback for things that we just kind of run and do, to Michael's point, just kind of do things and ask for forgiveness and you just drive them. And that's what I think Ben has really done and been a pioneer in that space. So some of the examples is that for Black History Month, we had maybe 1 or 2 events and the previous president said, hey, we should have a budget just for Black History Month. And one of our leaders said, okay, let's say I give you a budget, what would you do with it? And you cannot threaten us with a good time. We said we will make sure we put on initiatives that are for the community inside of the company and outside of it. So it's making sure that we're just thinking big. We're not just saying, okay, well, we can only do this. It's asking for it and making sure you build a case for it. So we're thinking about our customers inside, but also our customers externally. How do we make sure that Ben is also contributing to the business? We have things like Textures and Hues that launched where we're focused on Black hair care. Black women and Black men do not shop for their hair care products like everyone else. So that's also a part of being inclusive, is recognizing that people have differences and how can we make sure we're catering to those differences. And Ben has really been instrumental in making sure that we're acknowledging that. How do we make sure that we are leveraging the technologies that Amazon has? Those are things like an Alexa skill. Ben was the first AG to create an Alexa skill, and it allows people to ask her questions and she will give you answers on Black history facts. So it's, again, just driving action. Partnerships with Blavity, we brought that to GDIO, Angels Org, and said, hey, this is something that we think would be beneficial to our community, but also people who will attend. So it's just thinking big and not being afraid to just say, we want to do that. And that's how Ben continues to make sure that we're being day one. We're doing new things each year. We're listening to our community, working backwards, being customer obsessed. And I oftentimes say our customers are not just and people who use Amazon services, but I view our members as customers too. I'm here to serve them. And how do we do that? Continue to make sure that we don't forget that it's always day one. So I know it's a long answer, but there's just so many things I'm so proud of Ben, of all the things that we do. So I'm like, I could go on, but that's just how you continue to just be day one. You're not afraid to continue to just think of different things and think big.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great, Angelina. And I think what also resonates with me, I get the opportunity to work with you and sit in some of your executive meetings with your sponsor, is that the willingness to ask and to take executive sponsors at their word, where if you indicate you're committed, let me make sure that I give you the framing in partnership with resources that Amazon provides, as opposed to just, bearing the brunt of that as volunteers. And I think that's a super important nuance we have to make sure that we get right.
Yeah,
Alex, tell me about your approach. Oh, sorry, Angelina, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, yeah, it's important to make sure that when you're interacting with your executive sponsor, that it's not a give, give, give. You're building that partnership. How can I help you, and how can you help me? So to that point, it's really important for it to be a mutual relationship.
Give us an update on how you're keeping it day one at Glamazon.
Very similar to Angela and Ben, but we all look up to Ben because they've been here so long and they've been doing fabulous stuff. And it's about the collaboration and intersectionality. It helps us, know from their experiences what we can do, what we can bring forward, and how we can make the queer community and the transgender community, non-binary, et cetera, a more inclusive community at Amazon. We have to keep our passions aligned. And so I think when we work with other affinity groups, we only stay day one because we're getting more knowledge. We're sharing ideas. We're making sure we're holding each other up. For instance, Ben did the Pride flag raising with us with Glamazon, and that was a big event and an incredibly collaborated one. And it just, especially for Glamazon, it really shows our identity and how important it is for people to see themselves. We are also forcing creativity. We've been trying to put on a town hall, but with COVID-19, we keep having to move it. So that's going to be a very important event because that's going to bring everyone together, different affinity groups and different allies, and be able to be more visible and have others be more knowledgeable about our affinity group.
Yeah, that's great, Alex. And I think it just reinforces that, people sometimes ask, do affinity groups actually build silos? And I think that what we're finding is no, it's that building where you have a brick that goes on top of a brick and just makes it stronger, and it's intertwined, and it's just really great. And I know that to you, we've talked about how important it is also to feel seen in that process, to make sure that we're not just having some of these, having intersectional experiences that don't come to the forefront, that we're actually celebrating them as well. Kind of talking about this, what are your priorities for 2020 as you think about what you're looking to do? Alex, can you tell us a little bit about what Glamazon is focused on for 2020?
Yeah, sure. I am proud to share that we are keeping our focus moving globally, and we have a new chapter in New Delhi. This chapter is focusing on educating India-based Amazonians and allyship and the LGBTQIA+ community in India using training materials specifically created for that project. And then later part of last year, we have the Glamazon hosted Transformative. And that's a one-day conference about gender diversity inclusion put on by the Transgender Engagement Committee. And that features panels of transgender Amazonians, leadership, members of the benefits teams, and guest speakers.
Great, thank you. I remember Transformative last year. It was really, really great. Just a great education. And I actually shared it with my kids in some ways. We went back to some of the other tapings. It was really great. So Angelina, tell me about Ben. We've heard, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that's the part of the external community. Like when you share it with your children or with family members, et cetera, it's the knowledge and the learning keeps going on.
That's great. Angelina, we often hear about Ben having kind of some of the most experience we hear. We're going to copy and paste some of what Ben does. I think that we heard some of that. Tell me about what Ben has on tap for 2020.
Yeah, so similar to Glamazon, we've definitely had to pivot our priorities and our events given the current events that are impacting our community and what we're facing. So our current priorities for the remainder of 2020 are one, civic engagement. We're focused on voter education and voter awareness. I want to make sure that we really tie in education into this because it's important for people to have historical context as to why are we in the positions that we're in today. how do we make sure that we're raising awareness of voter suppression? A lot of people think that that ended with the Voting Rights Act, and it didn't. How do we make sure that people who are in different states understand the things that may be in place that are suppressing their votes so that they can be prepared? So that is a really big thing, an initiative that we're driving for the first time this year, and we'll continue that on to 2021. Professional development, we're focused on having monthly workshops, things like working backwards. That's a very Amazon thing. How do you have effective workload balance? And we partner with Women's Ad on that. But then also preparing for the launch of our Executive Leadership Development Program, where we are focused on providing Black employees with mentors and sponsors and increasing the number of Black executives we have at the company. So that's what we're doing for professional development, and that will also continue on into 2021. And then as a response to the impact that COVID-19 has had on our communities, making sure that we are supporting Black businesses and entrepreneurs. As a lot of people are aware that COVID has disproportionately impacted the Black community. So how can we make sure that we are supporting them beyond the grants that a lot of companies have provided to them? So we're doing that through things like Ben Startup Week. So we had that recently where we had a week-long series of events where we highlighted Black entrepreneurs and startups, and also shared resources that Amazon has for them. That's like the Marketplace, AWS Startup, Launchpad, Handmade. How can we make sure that we're helping to sow seeds into our community that goes beyond just a one-time donation, but how can we help them generate long-term wealth? If you look at what happened in the last recession, a lot of great startups came up from that. And how can we make sure that we are seeing more Black startups come up during this time, and how can we help foster that for them? So those are things that we are focused on for the remainder of 2021, and a lot of it came remember 2020, and a lot of that came from us listening to our community and working backwards from the needs that we see that our members, our customers are saying that they want. We're doing that, and there's a lot of other things coming down the pipeline that I'm excited about.
That's great. Thank you, Angelina. That is very exciting, and the Ben Startup Week was amazing. I know that a lot of folks got a lot out of it, and it was just a really great opportunity to leverage some of what we've learned and teach other entrepreneurs, because really that's something that's so critical to Amazon startup culture, is that thought that you can have your business, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be an intrapreneur and still have a career here. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, Amazon's a big startup. So that's what we really want to touch on. We use Twitch, which is an Amazon subsidiary that is a startup. So how do we continue to foster that so we have more Amazons, more Twitches, more AWSs?
Gladys, would you like to go next in terms of the 2020?
Sure, yes. So as mentioned earlier, we do have very focused objectives on recruiting to bridge the representation gap, career development to make sure that Latinos continue advancing and having successful careers here at Amazon. But we have also put reasonable resources to engage our community. As you mentioned, we have many Latinos here, and because of COVID-19, and many of our members are basically frontline employees impacted by COVID every day. And so we felt that it was very necessary to continue with the Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. Originally, we used to have live events, and now we pivoted to virtual events. We started out with a goal of having maybe 5 or 10 events, and we ended up, when we all got together and put all hands on deck, it was just amazing. We have over 25 events lined up for the month, from September 15th to October 19th. And actually, it's very inspiring, and it's just very moving to see how, I know my passion. I know that I'm here to serve my community. I consider myself very privileged to be here at Amazon. I come with a very humble background, and so I always felt a high sense to pay it forward and to open up doors for others that are walking along my side, and also others that are going to come behind me. And so having to see all the support from the Amazon community, from GDIO, from the AGs, we're doing a lot of intersectionality and events with Ben and Women's Ad and Wi-Fi and everybody else. And so that makes me feel very proud and makes me feel encouraged to continue working hard and just not only supporting our internal community, but we are also able to leverage the resources to Also reach out our external communities. There are different Latino serving NGOs or non-for-profit organizations with which we have partnered to understand what do they need as far as maybe products, what do they need as far as funding, what do they need to make sure that they can serve the community who is going severe underemployment or unemployment, really, right? So you have a lot of people who are turning to these non-for-profits for food, for shelter, for childcare. A lot of people cannot afford to stay home to help their kids to do virtual schooling. And so all of those things are taking a big front stage in our initiatives this year. And we aim to try to do as much as we can and continue advocating for that external customer within Amazon to ensure that we can provide the support for those NGOs. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Gladys. Michael, talk about what's on deck for 2020 for this year. That's almost over, but for this year.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, we're definitely in startup mode. We're one of the newest AGs. We're not the newest, but we were a fairly recent addition. And so for us, it's really just building our culture. We are, I guess, in software engineering terms, I'm a software engineer nerd, I would say we're starting to productionalize ourselves. Number one is learning the levers of power, or what kind of ways we can influence the way Amazon does business, and also how it conducts itself within the greater community, the global community. And what we've been finding not necessarily isn't a problem of friction, but it's actually been an issue of capacity. So we're a small organization. There's not very many of us. We're finding more and more every day. So what we really need to do is honestly just organize and be able to take advantage of the opportunity that I have here at Amazon. And so I'm the very first president, and I see myself more as a transitional president, from taking us from the creation of Indigenous Ad to this new stage, which is going to be very exciting in 2021, where we start actually blooming. I guess this part right now, we're just sort of in a very heads down, trying to organize ourselves, understand what we want to do too is also very important, and developing these processes with our peers, our friends, and Dan and Glamazon. And our entire creation process as an Infinity group was built upon advice from Latinos at and Glamazon advisors, and how it's been organized. And so we take inspiration with that and also give it an Indigenous twist. We have our own protocols and processes. And even within our Indigenous board, we are not all of the same tribe. We represent members from across the continent, the Sacred Island, North America. And it's really important to understand the diversity even within Indigenous communities and present this to the business in our leadership, who have been very welcoming. They're very interested, very curious, and it's really more an issue of how do we maximize this opportunity. And that's our goal for this year. Next year, I think, to get bigger. Right now,
you're in the starting blocks. That's great. And I think that the common themes that I hear, both in what you shared in terms of what's important to you, but also in terms of what you're working on, really is that movement to action. And that's something that's also very Amazonian, where we say good intentions don't drive change. Action or mechanisms drive change. So you need a process, and you need specificity around how we're moving forward. And I think that that's something that really resonated. The other thing is we're thinking about the customer and that intersectionality, that naming the customer again, like who is the customer? And you just even shared, Michael, in terms of even the education about, how many tribes there are out there. It is very similar to some of what Angelina is talking about relative to the diaspora, but it's even, to another maybe level of broad held ignorance in the United States and beyond. So I just really, these things really energize and excite me. So when we think about what it is that, one of the questions and one of the things that I asked you, what are the things that you always get asked? And what I hear from you is that something that people often ask you is that what motivates you to engage in an affinity group? What motivates you to, with a full-time job, often external community responsibilities or family responsibilities? Many of you are also either board members or participants in organizations outside of Amazon. So what inspires you to lead in this space? And Gladys, I wonder if I can ask you to start on that. This was something that really was important, I think, for you to share as well.
Yes, I am an immigrant. I was born and raised in Lima, Peru. I immigrated and I was raised by a indigenous grandmother. She spoke Quechua, didn't speak Spanish very well. So I share with Michael and say, hey, I'm indigenous too. I'm an indigenous Latina. So that's one thing that we also have in common. I immigrated to the US when I was 15. I didn't have family support. I didn't speak or read English. And so, but because of the work that I put into it and because of different people that just were involved in my life in Latino outreach programs that were at the time in my high school, I was able to understand the value of an education, and I understood that that was basically my way out of poverty. And so I really latched on to all of those resources, talked to the people that could help, and I was able to graduate from high school. I graduated from college. I pursue a CPA certification, and I am here today. Based on those statistics, you really don't think that someone like me would be here today at Amazon because all the odds were against me. But that's the story that I'm telling you, and I also share with kids that we bring to Amazon. One of the programs that I founded here at Amazon, it's called the Latinos at Amazon High School Outreach Programs, which basically we identify underprivileged kids in our community, Latino and other underrepresented minorities, and we bring them here to Amazon for a day. Last year, in the past, we've toured the LSU campus, but this year we haven't been able to. However, we've pivoted to doing not only, in the past we did one-on-one, a campus visit, and also a day with the real Latino Amazonians, right? And so that was a very successful program. We were able to engage with different school districts. The kids got to come visit the campus, go to the ghost store, and then speak to real Amazonians. And again, that program just was very inspiring just for me to see not only how much interest there was from the school districts. The school districts were so interested, they were knocking on their doors. We, because of bandwidth and resources, sometimes we're limited to having just maybe 2 or 3 a year. But if they could, they would be coming here every month and trying to engage us to just present to the kids and tell them our stories, right? A lot of these kids are like first-time college bound, our first generation immigrants, Latinos in the US, born in the US. And so a lot of times they don't have resources at home, someone that can help them and through the college application process, much less through college life, because for me, it was very hard. I made it to college, but it took me many years and a lot of hard work to really catch up and be able to graduate, right? And all of that takes a lot of support. And so the purpose of the program is to really provide a venue, a pipeline for us to reach underprivileged students, bring them over and help them see that if they do XYZ, they can have all of these potential opportunities for them to have successful careers. Whether it is at Amazon or outside of Amazon, the intent is really to influence and help students. And so that is one of the ways that I feel very passionate about just serving with Latinos at Amazon. But after becoming vice president for Latinos at Amazon, to Michael's point, then you turn around and you see that there's a lot more opportunities that we could do and resources that we can leverage. And so you start thinking about very entrepreneurial. Latinos are very entrepreneurial. We like to build things, we like to think about things, and we like to resolve for things. So we're very hands-on. And so one of the things that we're really actively working is into expanding that program And now that everything is virtual, rolling out a virtual program, which is very exciting because we can scale. Everything is virtual, so there's nothing stopping us from having this program, not only in the US, but also in Europe. We have chapters in Europe, we have chapters in Latin America, in Tokyo, in Australia. And so if we develop a playbook, potentially this program can scale globally. And so that's very exciting to me.
That's great, Gladys. And Angelina, I'm going to ask you to speak on that next.
I can follow up on Gladys's answer, and I just want to make sure that I note every time Gladys shares her story, I'm just always just so inspired, and I just love your story. So thank you for sharing your story with me and everyone else. I think there's a lot of people who would relate to it, so thank you for sharing that. For me, the reason why I am a part of the affinity group, Ben, and why I want to lead is kind of similar to Gladys in the sense that I'm able to drive tangible difference. I love my community deeply, and when my community is hurting, I hurt. So this year has been emotionally draining for me, and I'm like telling myself, like, make sure I don't cry. But it has been so impactful for me to be able to pour my emotions and feelings into Ben this year. It's been a really great outlet for me. You know, I'll be honest, in May, I think I probably didn't go 1 or 2 days without just crying, because just seeing the numbers of how COVID impacted the Black community, it was really, it shook me. And I had family members who were sick, but to see the people who were literally dying and have access to healthcare, or to see how a lot of the Black restaurants were struggling because they were already on a month-to-month basis anyway. So for me, I just felt like I sat in a place of privilege, and I didn't like how that felt. And I felt like I needed to do something. If you know me, I'm constantly trying to figure out how I can help other people. So I felt at times that it was useless, and that really hurt me a lot. So to be able to kind of take a step back and think about what access do I have, what privilege or platforms do I have, and I realized I can do a lot of things via Ben. So reaching out to our leaders and saying, hey, we're doing these type of grants, how do we make sure that Black restaurants are getting grants? How can we make sure that our Black employees are feeling comforted? So the fact that I was able to, while there's so many problems going on in the world and the problems are so vast, and that the things that I'm doing, maybe it's only impacting a fraction, the fact that I'm able to impact someone made me feel good. I feel good when I'm able to help solve a problem or at least bridge things together. And I'm able to do that via Ben. And that has been so instrumental for me during my Amazon time, but especially over the last 6 months. It's unexplainable how I feel about my community. I don't know how to say it enough of how much I love my community, and it's just figuring out how can I leverage whatever I have. And I'm so thankful for the platform that I have and the voice that I have to speak up for people who are afraid to speak up, or people who no longer have a voice, for no longer here. I'm thankful for my role in Ben to be able to do that. So that's why I continue to lead and be a part of Ben.
That's great. Thank you so much, Angelina. And you have been, Ben, and all of the communities, like when we think about COVID and how it's affected our communities, it has been super important to make sure that we are co-creating solutions, and we're hearing from you, and as we're looking at different ways. So I really appreciate you sharing and you being vulnerable and sharing, and Gladys as well in terms of your story, because I think that it's super important. Michael, tell me about why, again, with everything going on with, in our busy lives, why you feel it's important and what inspires you to lead in the Indigenous Affinity Group.
I think the reason why I'm inspired to work in the Affinity Group at Amazon, I think, is my personal story. I'm very fortunate. I grew up within my Indigenous community. And when my mother's home village, nearly everyone only spoke their traditional Cheyenne. And that's what I grew up. I grew up with my close family, a tight-knit family, my cousins, my aunts and uncles. And then traditionally in our tribe, we treated our aunts like mothers and our uncles like fathers. And to me, basically it was living in this nest of friends and family who were all literally family. And I was fortunate enough to also have like traditional background teaching, and which was also balanced by technology. Like my mother used to work for a large technical company in Denver and was a laser lithographer before I was born. And so I grew up like of two minds. My dad was an artist, a traditional artist. My mother was a technologist. And so as I grew up and went into college, I got into computer science. And I discovered that not a lot of my peers, my indigenous Native American peers, had this opportunity. And due to a variety of different reasons, socioeconomic, this simple access, like in rural Montana, where I grew up, I didn't have regular water growing up. I didn't have regular electricity, never mind internet. I was 15 years old when my village finally got a telephone. And it was like the biggest, most exciting thing in the whole wide world. We can actually contact someone without having to drive somewhere. And so I've been very fortunate. And now I'm here at Amazon. I'm seeing how these problems are endemic. Like looking at it from the viewpoint of Amazon and its scale, you can see that not every indigenous person can participate as a customer of Amazon simply because of barriers and friction that are endemic to America. And what inspires me to continue working here, coming back to that, is that by simply introducing ourselves as indigenous peoples and showing our culture to the people and the employees of Amazon, like last year at Indigenous Peoples Day was our first celebration, I saw my coworkers start dancing to the beat of an Aztec drum. And like, I don't know much about the Aztecs, but I do know that they have similar values to me. And I know that we have these commonalities with other indigenous peoples. And then to see that impart itself upon non-indigenous people and be so inspired to help us on this mission of bringing this gift of technology and, you know, the power of Amazon's, you know, the benefits of Amazon and being a technology company and all this. Like, we created allies. We created hundreds of allies just through the Indigenous Peoples Day, showcasing the Aztec culture, and which drove forward. So we inspired help. We inspired allies. And this year, for the very first time, we had a cohort of indigenous interns. So we had 6 Native American interns that we recruited in 2019. They joined us this summer. And so I'm Lakota and Cheyenne. And one of the Lakota kids, that was an intern, reached out to me on our internal communications channel, Chime. He said, "Hey, Michael, I remember you we went to ACES." And I was just like amazed, like, holy cow, we got one. And I found there was like 6 of them. I reached out to them. We tried to introduce Amazon to them. And it was like, it's the first step. It's a tiny, tiny step. When you start thinking about the numbers of indigenous people who are not in technology, but it's the very first step. You could see the transformation simply by introducing ourselves to Amazon and the employees and our allies. And that's what inspires me. Like, I can see how little effort, small changes within this large global company affect so much change. And I can see the potential. And that's what inspires me.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. So Alex, let's go to you. I mean, I think that this again is something that we've talked about in terms of being visible. What inspires you to stay engaged with Glamazon?
You know, I'm the youngest of 14 kids, and I'm not used to being alone. And when I go in the San Francisco office, there's not anyone that looks like me, and there's definitely no queer people. And I feel that when we have affinity groups that I can align myself with, I'm going to put as much energy that I can, because I don't want anybody to feel like that. I want to be able to work with Ben and see what I can do and how I can contribute. I want to work with Glamazon and see how I can contribute. And all of it rolls into making sure that there's queer and Black people that look like me present. It's hard to be the only one in the room. And I want this to change. And I know Amazon is working really hard to make sure that these change. I know Ben is working really hard to make sure the changes happen. I know Latinas at Amazon are working really hard to make sure that we are not alone, that our communities are well represented at the business, at Amazon, at AWS, at Twitch, whatever. And so I just want to put in as much energy as I can so people can feel safe, So we have the ability to know, we have the ability to bring it to the forefront that we exist, and that so it allows me to stay passionate, because I want to be able to let go of these pain points that I have around being the only one in the room sometimes. I'm fortunate, my account team is well represented. We're like, you know, the United Nations, but that's unusual. That's not the way it is. And so I want to feel strong about bringing people to be visible and being inclusive and feeling safe here at Amazon, because you see others that look like you see others that are your orientation, and you have a safe place to go to and talk about when there's difficulties. And I've used Glamazon that way. I can reach out to anyone and ask questions, and they're so, you know, embracing. I was so shocked when I went to my first conference, AKO in Chicago, and there was a room of Black people. I was shocked, and it was a band gathering, and I felt so at home. I felt so at home. And then, you know, to know that queer people are calling me up and saying, hey, we're going to meet here, we're going to meet there, and just having family, right? And to know that I can come to work and feel held.
That's great. And it's interesting because, I mean, this is the thing that I love about my job, right? Part of what I do is get to support your organization so that it is, and we have the mechanisms to ask for the resources. So it isn't the affinity groups only bearing that brunt. And that's something that's really important to us as we start thinking about that balance. Okay, I have one final question that I'd like to ask you, and just very briefly, you're professionals, you've made it a priority to ensure that your passion and your purpose show up at work. What is one piece of advice as attendees navigate this conference that you would give to balance that either at Amazon or anywhere else, like just as a part of their career, bringing that passion and purpose and coming into work? What is the advice that you would give them? Let's go and start with Michael, if you don't mind.
Okay. One piece of advice to a new engineer or a new professional would be to make sure that the company that you choose aligns with your ethical values, and have deeply research where you go. I mean, research Amazon, research us, reach out to us. We're here because we're not forced to here. We're here voluntarily. And we do this because we have a deep passion, and we've been enabled by Amazon. And I would say that you would need to, similarly in yourself, find some place where you would feel passionate going to every day, and it's ethical and it aligns with your values, like how Amazon is for me and the rest of us on this panel.
Great, thanks, Michael. Gladys?
For me, I would say wherever you go, make sure that you feel that you can bring your authentic self. You feel like you see others like you. You feel that you can reach out to your community. And I would definitely advise you, wherever you go, reach out to your Latinos not at Amazon, but Latino community inside. One of the things that I'm very happy about, I do participate in these candid chats when we bring candidates and they choose to speak to an affinity group representative or leader. I volunteer for that because I'm very enthusiastic to talk to people and letting them know that there is a community here, that we're here to help you. You're not alone. If you want recommendations and classes and career development programs and mentorship programs, circles, sponsorship, how to just anything to bring your career to the next level, here we are here. And I always tell them, you know, look, we are like this benefit that it's not like an official benefit on your employment package, but we're here, we're your family. We're here to help you, and we're very excited to see you succeed. So wherever you are, you should reach out to your community. Definitely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Angelina?
Yeah, I think the best advice that I can give someone is really to make sure that you're protecting your peace. I think about that in the sense of when you're going to work, are you happy? Do you have that sense of community? I know for me, that community has been at times where I feel like the work was hard. And I've had that. If you don't feel like you have that, whether you are working at Amazon or working at another company, I think it's important to make sure you're protecting your peace. If you think that you've exhausted any other options by switching teams, I think Amazon's a huge company and each org is different, the cultures can vary. Making sure that you're prioritizing your happiness and that you're working on something that is growing you and helping you to innovate for customers. We can't be our best selves if we're not happy. So I think the best advice I can give people, especially in the times that we're in, is making sure that you're protecting your peace and that you feel that wherever you are, you feel included and cared about. So that would be my advice.
That's great advice, Angelina. Alex?
Yeah, that was well said, Michael, Angelina, and Gladys. And the only thing that I have that I want to add to all of what's been said is ensure that you have a balanced relationship with work, fitness, health, emotional well-being. It's all part of bringing your authentic self to wherever you do, but just make sure that you have that balance and that you take care of you. And especially in this world of COVID-19, we have to take care of ourselves.
Thank you. What great advice. So I want to close by thanking you all for your time and your wisdom and for your partnership. It's something that I get to personally benefit from as we engage with one another. And also, I appreciate how much you talk about the mechanisms, the ways that Amazon makes you feel comfortable. I also appreciate when we get in great conversations about how we can do better, because for us, we say it's always day one, and that is absolutely true here. If we haven't learned anything this year, then we've at least learned that we can always do better as we rise different challenges we hadn't thought of by way of COVID, and to have opportunities to do things differently like we do with virtual and so forth. So I just want to thank you. It's been a great conversation, and hope you get a chance to log on and join the rest of the summit.
Okay, see you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Nice seeing you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.